when things go bad or shit hits the fan for me, I've come to a point now where I'm like, okay, this is life teaching me something. It's going to make sense maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 5 years, but no point of getting depressed or getting bitter over it, but just rather, enjoy the experience. It's just an experience.
All right. Okay. Now we can finally kick off. I love those kind of chats beforehand because we could literally go back and forth for fucking hours, I feel sometimes. But it's going to be good. And I really appreciate you doing this because, of course, you're busy, you're building AI platforms. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Super excited.
So it's not often that I see many Westerners out in Singapore or in Asia in general, but you've been here for like 12 years now?
12 years, yeah.
How does someone come from Estonia, so where wouldn't be traveling much, or would you travel often, to come into Singapore, which is like one of the biggest countries now in the world for capita, for opportunity and everything?
So I keep joking that I'm a climate refugee. Everybody takes a second to think about, they laugh and then they're like, what's that? So joke aside, one of the criterias for me to come to Singapore was weather. So I come from a country that has minus 30 degrees for 2 months a year.
30?
Minus 30. Minus
what
30.
The fuck?
Yes.
How do you get around?
We really don't, but you adjust layers and layers and layers. But back in 2011, when I graduated from uni, it was still post-great financial crisis, not much to do in Europe. So I was, bright-eyed and pushy-tailed, wanted to do something, only to be told, no, you're too ambitious. No, I think you're gonna jump. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. So all the major banks in Estonia basically rejected me. I was like, fuck this.
What did you study?
I'm going to go to Singapore. I had business administration degree with focus on English as well. So my English language was pretty decent. Packed my bags, never been to Asia before, came with 2 suitcases and a backpack. I had a bit of an online gig before online job was a thing. Came to Singapore, started networking, reached out to Estonian network here, only to be told that you're never going to find a job through applying. You have to go to networking events. So started networking and I was lucky enough to get a job with Bank of America.
That was before LinkedIn? Before everything?
LinkedIn was just becoming a thing, but it wasn't really a place where you could network. So it was actually going to physical events like wine tastings. And there was this organization called Internations. I think it's still present. I think it's still functioning club or whatever you call that. It's expat community effectively. So just started going, shaking hands, mentioning looking for a job. Again, back in 2011, Singapore had pretty open immigration policy. It wasn't that difficult to get a job, I would say.
Okay.
But it was. I would say I was lucky. But luck favors those who are prepared.
100%.
So.
And that's cool as well. How like the principles are the same. You just got to network. You got to meet people like
Absolutely.
we do. We introduce on LinkedIn initially.
Yeah.
But isn't that like sick? How of course it's what you know, but it's also like how much you're willing to push yourself to go and meet people, you know what I mean? Because myself, like I'm not educated to the highest standard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did a degree, did well, whatever, but it's not like I came from an Ivy League school.
Absolutely.
Same with yourself from Estonia, like I'm not too sure what the education system's like, but like you got further ahead than 99% of people because you packed your bags, you left Estonia, you came here and you met the right people.
Yeah.
And you ended up in...
It worked out well, right? And like you rightfully point out, it wasn't about education, but I think it was just the level of proactiveness that people appreciated. Like going around, shaking hands, introducing myself. This is what I am. I have no experience in finance, but I really want to work in finance. And I think some people actually were a bit dumbfounded, like, are you for real? And I'm like, yeah. I am. But when you're young, you're a bit naive. And I was 20, 21, 22, something around that range. So it worked out really well. And I remember when I went to the first interview with Bank of America, the HR looks at me and she's looking at my profile and she's like, almost, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I was invited for an interview. So I am here for a job interview. Okay, cool. Went to the interview, did my 3-4 rounds. I was really transparent saying, I don't have the experience, but I will learn. Trust me, I will learn. I will make all the effort that I can to become the best. And I was, quite vocal about the fact that I really, really want the job. So I got the role. And the same HR, when I went to sign my employment contract, laughed at me and actually in a quite condescending manner saying, this is a business decision, like we would never hire you. When I got my vice president title in Bank of America, it was the same HR who signed off on that. And I was like, tell me again about that business decision.
Fucker.
Yeah. And she still follows me on LinkedIn. So sometimes likes my posts and stuff. So
envy.
Yeah.
It's envy and jealousy. You know what I mean? The reason being there is because you don't need to be the best with that stuff, you know? And especially getting those roles, traditionally, if you handed in your CVs, you'd be good at, you know, it's just, they take the top of the top. But you're doing something that's different, and that's what stands out. And I think it's the same with anything. It's the same with businesses. Like often they don't look for, if you're going to look to hire someone or you're going looking to get like a service done, you're not looking for the best person. You're looking for a person that can help you, that will get the work done. And you just showed the skills though.
Yeah.
And that's what people are looking for. And it was the exact same with me. I think there's a lot of similarities, you know. When I was working at State Street in London, like they could have picked people from, I don't know what colleges are, UCL. What even are the other ones at this stage? But they didn't. They picked some of the hungrier people that are willing to just get the work done.
Exactly. They will hustle.
Yeah.
To the max. They will hustle to the max. And I like the quote by, I think it's Richard Branson, you hire for attitude, you train for skill. So I think you can train people to do most jobs.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about, you know, being a brain surgeon or maybe corporate finance person who has to be highly technical knowledge. But for most jobs, I think you can train an average person within 3 to 6 months if they have the right mindset.
100%.
And the right attitude.
Yeah. 100%. When you were describing that story, you never once said about the economy or how things are going, how much you think it's about mindset versus anything else? Because now we're in a similar scenario.
Yeah.
Do you think that was the biggest thing that contributed for your success, you think?
Good question. Of course, desperate times require desperate means. The fact that I didn't have anything to do in Estonia at that point in time probably pushed me to take more risks. But I think I'm a natural risk taker by nature. I didn't know it back then. I know it now because I've taken many other risks in my life. So I think I'm pretty comfortable with navigating life when things aren't particularly comfortable around me. I'm not going to say I enjoy it, but I think I can manage to a point that I focus on the goal, what I'm trying to achieve. And that's almost becomes like a tunnel vision.
Yeah, because then you're not necessarily getting sidetracked by like, staying in safety. And I think you didn't know what safety was. Yeah. Because if you're in Estonia and you're leaving, you're like, well, this is the only thing I can do.
Exactly.
I do find that now as I'm got into my 27th year of existence.
27.
But what I have found though is that, you know, we come out of the gates of university, or if you don't go to university, you're all the same.
Yeah.
And then a year into it, you're kind of the same, 2 years into it. But it's the people that broke off, that ended up in different places or started something or just didn't want to take the traditional route. Yeah. They've just taken off. And there's guys that are 25, 24 that have been on my podcast that are doing way better than I am, that have made way better in the metric of money, right? Which isn't necessarily everything, to be fair. But it's just interesting though, isn't it? How like, as that time comes up, the way it diverges is people who just actually took the risk.
I would say so. I mean, obviously risks have to be measured and they can't be just, I'm just going to go and do something, right? Like
you need to know what the fuck you're going to do.
At least prepare for it, right? Yeah. I like to do something called scenario analysis. Again, something that probably I've developed in my later years. What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? Or most likely, the outcome is going to be somewhere in the middle. But prepare for the worst case scenario. So even with me coming to Singapore, I had probably about 4 months worth of money. I'm not going to say that I had money to rent an apartment. No, I shared with 5 people when I first got here. Yeah, in fact, my first condo wasn't too far from the studio. It was in Geylang, really? in Simsville. Yeah, so driving by, it's a bit of like, I remember this place. So yeah, I mean, going to fair price, shopping for the cheapest chicken, that type of stuff. It was a proper hustle for the first 2 years. But then things got better. Yeah,
of course. And also you just get, you appreciate it more.
100%.
So then when you're scaling up, you are getting better. But it's interesting because if you compare that to, let's say, the people who were in Bank of America or whatever, I do find, and I've learned this recently, one of the reasons why I got out of the likes of State Street and Accenture was because of the fact that I feel like you're always capped. That, of course, you've worked really hard, and I've listened to some of your work whereby you've done some extreme amount of work for Bank of America. But I feel like that input doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be earning more or getting more successful sometimes. And I have learned that the hard way, I guess. And even though you could be delivering a lot of outcomes for people, you're not necessarily moving in the right pace. So even you could be in those really, really good roles, but you're still capped.
100%. And one of the reasons why I became really frustrated with Bank of America, but especially with my first job, which was in operations, it was a very narrow role. And sort of the career path pointed in one direction, becoming a specialist in one thing.
Okay.
And even with my 22, 23 years of age, I realized I don't want to become a specialist at something. What if there's a big technological shift one day and my job becomes redundant? And what the hell am I going to do then, right? I'm a specialist at the time, cash management services, aka liquidity management. Right now, that function is all automated. So you have to diversify for the future as well, right? You have to have that lateral experience. So having experience in different parts of the bank was really beneficial, although they still kept me capping within that small box. This is your JD, you can't do anything above that. You shouldn't do this because you're going to step on someone's toes. And you have a lot of people with really big egos in these organizations. So I got into trouble quite a few times. But I would say not giving up has rewarded me now. And you know, I feel this at the age of 34 that probably more fluid type of role, more fluid companies is for me.
Every person that I speak to who has that kind of like entrepreneur spirit gets so frustrated with where they were.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, is the fact that they don't accept, I'm just happy out here doing that. They're always like really, and it's not the fact that they go and make these drastic changes, they just feel very uncomfortable and they feel frustrated. Yeah. And I was the exact same, you know, you run the numbers, like you keep it very, very simple. You think, okay, if I work harder, and actually there's actually a really good study done on this, is the fact that to get to those roles where you make 100K, 150K, 200K, you actually have to increase your output. So you'd probably imagine it in Bank of America, I remember in State Street and stuff like this, people actually work more. So they go from working 60 hours a week to 80 hours a week to working 100 hours a week. And there's a point in the curve that when you start earning more money, that people actually wish to give back some money so they can work less.
Yes.
And I thought that was very, very interesting, because now you've dedicated 20 of your years to this corporate role, but all you're looking for is to hand back some of the time.
Yeah.
You know, hand back some of the money to get some of the time back.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, time is just one aspect of that. I just saw an ex-colleague of mine from Bank of America a couple of days ago. So just for context, me and my business partner, who used to also work for Bank of America and who's a really good friend of mine, we had a meeting in downtown. So we're normally based in Chuchat. We went to our meeting in downtown, meeting with our lawyer, super casual meeting. My partner was wearing his yellow shorts. He has this colorful sunglasses. So absolute opposite of the corporate look, right? And I was wearing my orange dress. So we're both going, you know, walking around our previous office near OUE Bayfront. Oh. And an ex-colleague of ours sees us in his Bank of America outfit, white shirt, black trousers. Oh, Kaia, Deepo, come and say hi. So we have a conversation. And exactly the same chat we had with him 10 years ago. Oh, I wish I could do something on my own as well. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. And you could just see the guy was like basically dead, if you know what I mean. Like
100%.
It's just like a ghost. Exactly. And we had a quick chit chat, and on the way out, we were like, wow, thank God we left when we did, because we would be that person. And I'm not judging, I'm not condescending. It was an observation that it was a big decision for us to leave the corporate environment. Yeah. But it was the best thing, because here we are with our shorts and our colorful sunglasses, having casual lunch and actually enjoying what we do.
100%. I had the exact same realization, because for me it was more multifactorial. There's the health. There's like obviously like the wealth aspect, but there's also like the freedom aspect, the location. And of course, like you could work a job that could be in an office and you may enjoy it. But for me, when I walked into those offices in State Street, I've often said it that I would look down this grey office and there would be 80 to 100 people, and a lot of them would be out of shape, head down, eating their food at their desk. Like, you're very healthy as well, you're into that. And I remember just being like, oh my God. And I remember like the croissants going around the table, all this kind of shit. And I just thought that just wasn't me. So if that's not me on a regular basis, then why would I do it in a work sense? Yeah. You know? And of course, that's not saying that what you're doing on the side is easy. If anything, it's fucking 10 times harder. but at least you're working on something that you actually find more meaning in.
Absolutely. And I just want to get the point across. It's my comments are not condescending by no means.
Of course, yeah.
Everyone chooses their own path. I know people who absolutely love corporate career. Kudos. If this is for you, it's for you. It just wasn't for me at that point in time. Maybe I'll get to that point later in my life. Who knows? You never know these things. And I've come to a point to say never either, right? Yeah. Obviously, corporate life comes with certain financial security. It comes with a bit of more stability. Me now working for a startup company, man, we go from fundraising to fundraising to fundraising, right? So every 7 to 12 months, it's a proper stress. Are we going to close the round? Is, macro conditions favor us? Are we going to be in trouble again? So I understand why people want to work in a corporate and choose to stay in that environment.
100%. And it is, as we discussed previously, it's more life scenarios. Yeah. Like if people want to chill out, stay in their hometown, do whatever they want, then that's fine. But I feel like our personality is just not really geared towards that, Yeah. And that's why even in your startup now that you're working on, of course, it's different and it's more challenging, but I bet you enjoy it more for sure.
I do.
But even getting to some of those details on like how you're actually trying to raise money and stuff, can you walk through that process? So you're an AI platform, correct?
Yes. So we are an embedded finance company. Yeah. We build a technology infrastructure, and our sort of core business is alternative lending on B2B platforms. Okay. So think of Lazada's or maybe Shopee's. You have buyers, you have sellers, all businesses. So we basically synthesize the alternative data, the transactional data on the platform, and then we offer financing to the buyer on the platform. No need to take your financial statements, your bank statements, go to a bank, fill in gazillion forms, everything done on a real-time basis. And of course, we have an algorithm, the credit engine, driven by statistical models, which effectively is the AI.
So I know that credit startups are a mess to get backing.
Yes.
I've heard so many, I've heard so many stories now without going down the deep fucking finance rabbit hole. It's something to do with how much cash you need at reserve.
Absolutely.
And how much liquidity you need. So how the fuck did you get capital?
So we did, we structured our business a bit differently. So we have two companies within the same holdco. Okay. One of them is technology infrastructure company, which is financed by venture. And then we have asset management side of the business. So we hold the lending balance sheet completely separate from the fintech side of the business. So when a venture capitalist comes and looks at our business, they don't see any loans on our balance sheet because we have segregated that into segregated vehicle and we raise capital for that separately. So that's actually a pretty smart way of doing it because you are not capping your valuation at the multiple of your lending book. Instead, you are valued at the multiple of your revenue, like a typical startup would be.
How much money you're actually making versus...
Exactly. And what is your SaaS revenue, which is our main metrics. But that also puts us in a situation that we need to raise capital for two businesses now. Yeah. One of them being the fintech side of the business, and then the separate entity, which is the lending business, or it's a private credit fund in Singapore, effectively. So yeah, it's interesting and challenging, and
How'd you get into it?
Great question. I think like with everything in my life, in a way, I stumbled into it. I've had quite a few career shifts in my life. Like I mentioned, I started in Bank of America operations. I did that for about 18 months, realized I am not operations person at all. I absolutely hate procedures. When given me standard operating procedure, I went nuts. That's the best way to describe. I put up my hand again. I started asking for opportunities within Bank of America. I was really lucky because that was the time when internal mobility was a big thing. So I was moved to investment banking, to a front office role. I was told this is impossible move to make. I was like, hold my beer, hold my wine, hold my water.
Let me
do it. So I was really lucky. Again, I keep saying lucky, but I guess a few things were in my favor. I had shown the proactiveness. I was present at every single employee network event. I was doing my CFA in parallel, which is sort of like a financial certification. Just being really proactive within that banking,
world.
Employee network world, yeah. I was given opportunity to go to investment banking, massive culture shock, coming from operations, everything slow paced, we have lunch, going to investment banking, super aggressive, basically all men, backstabbing, really, really, chauvinistic environment.
Isn't that what life is like, though? Again, in terms of ultra competitiveness. Of course, that's an extreme example.
I think life is what you make of it. I think a lot of it comes down what has been your experience, because we tend to see things as we are, not as things actually are.
100%,
so our past does generate our reality. But it was again an awesome experience because I got to reinvent myself, and I think I'm a chameleon. I've come to realize I am a chameleon. I can change my persona and my the way I show up. And not to say this is fake, but some roles just come to me more naturally. It was an interesting time. Enjoyed it. Then what happened was the Bank of America decided to reorganize their lines of businesses. I was fired by Bank of America and hired on the same day. So they cut my role, but they said, but we have another role for you, basically. So for somebody who's on EP, right, you can imagine what a roller coaster that was for me. Basically telling me, we're firing you. You have 30 days to leave the country. I was like, but you may be, eligible for another position with the bank. I was like,
So the interview...
It was happening all same day, everything same day basis. Yeah. Then I got another job that I, again, absolutely hated. So it was a business controls officer for global markets, very compliance driven.
Sounds boring.
Sounds boring. And that's exactly what it is. I had no friends. So the job was such that I had to make sure that all our front office employees were adhering to regulatory requirements, including in their communications and stuff, right? So I had to go through people's emails to see if they were perhaps doing something that was maybe illegal, or maybe there was something that was unethical and that type of stuff. Zero friends within the bank, Darren. I can tell you, nobody wanted to hang out with me. Zero. So and became quite depressed. Didn't enjoy that at all. And then the same friend that I work with now had already jumped to a hedge fund.
Okay.
He offered me a position there, which was another 180-degree turn, going into investment analysis role. Was there for a couple of years. Then I had sabbatical year in Cyprus, which we can talk about as well. And then out of the blue in August 2021, my friend says, Kaia, maybe it's time to come back and join my startup now, my little startup. I need a chief investment officer and a partner. So I was like, okay, fine. Let's try that.
So the hedge fund was in Cyprus?
The hedge fund was in Singapore, but in Cyprus, I was working for a FX brokerage company, which was interesting. It was rewarding. That's how I started with all my media exposures and stuff. But I consider this as a sort of like a COVID job. Just something that paid the bills for a year, helped me to be closer to Europe, because my mom's in Europe. And it was just a lovely way to spend lockdown year when you guys were all going 100%. Nuts in big cities. I was drinking wine in Cyprus on the beach and having olives.
Of course. How come you left Cyprus so? If you enjoyed it?
I enjoyed it for 1 year. It was always temporary for me, temporary. And when my friend invited me to join the startup, it was no question. It was something I had already visualized and written down in my little journal about a year ago, 1 year before that I would like to work as a chief investment officer. And it manifested itself. I got 100%. I got the job that I wanted.
You walked in the right direction?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But what I say, life nudged me, right? It's not like I started applying, I started for making effort. It was almost as if I had manifested, I had prepared my background, and it just happened.
And that's where it's interesting, because like you could look at other people and think, like they have it easier, they have it better. But like everything you did accumulated and compounded to that moment. And of course it's a shitstorm, no doubt, where you're working at the moment. But you're at that position now and you're super young, you're in a very senior position. And if you didn't leave Bank of America, you would not be where you are right now.
Nope.
So there is that detachment that has to happen. And that's like an element of loss aversion, because people think, and of course I'd love to get into the trading aspect too, which you have a background in, is like people think that because they're taking one step back, they can only go back. But that's not the case at all. You know what
Brilliant.
I mean? Even when you move across, you can always go back to it, as terrible as that sounds, but you can even do that,
Absolutely.
If it doesn't work out. But the fact that you seem to be happier in what you're doing right now, of course it's a shitstorm, but you're in the right position. And in the AI space, you really hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on AI from someone who's working in the industry?
I think it's a overly used terminology and words. I think in general, AI has become a massive trend word, right? I mean, generative AI with ChatGPT is just like the one topic on the headlines. I just read an interesting article about Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak signing a paper, or rather an open letter, saying that they would wish that the investment into generative AI would be put on pause for the next 6 months, just because there's so much money invested into that industry. I think we should establish some sort of ethics and rules as a society way before we start developing, which is interesting. It's going to happen one way or the other. I think AI is here to come, but I think taking a bit of a pause, thinking where do we want to go is probably a good idea.
And what do you want to use it for?
Absolutely. I mean, our AI is literally it's data processing machine. It's predictive credit engine. That's it. It's nothing more. But generative AI, such as ChatGPT, that's a bit different, right? Because if it takes additional data sets, I don't even know what's the underlying data, how they actually collect that data. That's something completely different, very unimaginable even for me, because I'm not a tech person, obviously. So it's interesting to see how that develops. Have you used, by the way, ChatGPT?
Use it for everything.
Same, absolutely same, yeah.
So I use it for podcast stuff. I use it even for client stuff. If we use a transcript, I can pull a transcript from this podcast into a blog, into a newsletter, into tweets, into posts. I can use it for everything, you know. I don't use it all the time though, but it would aid my decision, you know. So Lex Friedman, you know Lex Friedman?
Yes.
Yeah, he recorded a podcast with, I think his name is Sam Altman, which is the CEO of OpenAI. And he was saying that like you could tell a lot from someone's character when they get onto ChatGPT and their first question. So some people are like, oh, like why is Trump better than Biden?
Yes.
And then there's some people then who are trying to find out like some weird like kinks.
Yeah.
And there's some other people then that are using it for business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's like that's like the divide. The political people over there, people on that side. So it's about what you're going to use it for, you know what I mean? But it's definitely something that has to be more cautious about, because now we're just using it for everything.
Yes.
But question for you on this is, do you think that kind of bubble will burst a small bit? Of course it's going to stay around, but will the bubble burst? Because not so long ago we had the metaverse, and before that we had like the early days of crypto where people were like, you know, crypto's going to be everything. So what's your perspective on that?
Absolutely. I think it will, like with everything, it will become a bubble and then it will burst. Maybe it will become a bit of a smaller bubble than we had with crypto and with metaverse, just because it's not zero interest rate environment at this point, right? So money actually has a cost. So it's not like you can throw money at something and see what sticks in a way. So I think it will be relatively smaller bubble, but I think it will be a bubble, which is great. And even from, you know, early 2000s, it was a massive tech bubble. A few companies survived and they're massive these days. Google is a great example. Pets.com died, right? That's another extreme. So a few good companies always will remain. But that's the industry, right? I mean, you have to try, and that's the whole venture business. I mean, look how venture capitalists invest. They have a portfolio, maybe 40% will be successul, but those 40% are going to generate.
40%? That's high.
That's pretty high, even, right? 20 to 40% is the sort of estimate. But if those companies do well, then the remaining 80 to 60 to 80 nobody cares about.
I have a weird perspective on venture world.
Yeah.
Some things to me just doesn't really add up sometimes. A lot of people like who are like building a startup will talk about raising capital, will talk about this stuff, and nothing materializes. And they'll either like have like entrepreneur porn and just walk around speaking to investors and nothing happens.
Yeah.
Or of course, like there's some companies like yours that need to be venture backed to accelerate the growth. Of course, I understand that, and coming from Revolut, of course, it's necessary. But sometimes it just seems like people could be building their business instead of just trying to raise capital all the time. You know, there's definitely people in the very beginning that can either take the first step, especially now, because obviously you said there's a cost of capital, that maybe, you know, if you could either self-fund or try to do something yourself to prove the idea. I don't know what your kind of perspective on that is, because especially the last couple of years was a bit kind of fishy to me.
Industry is changing for sure. I mean, we've had running jokes about that in the office as well with a couple of my partners. at some point you could go with a pitch deck and you could raise anything from 1 to 5 million, just based on an idea.
My best mate here said that to me. I won't say his name, but he was like, I can get you in a room with an investor. You can bring a slide in and he'll give you anything you want.
There you go. So that was a thing. It's not a thing now, for sure.
Of course, that's what I mean.
Maybe a few exceptions there. Adam Newman's of the world. I mean, next WeWork executive who just raised, 800 million with his new venture.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you're like, are VC stupid sometimes? Look at the past track history. He probably did a record by bringing valuation of WeWork down from like 48 billion to 4 billion, right? Like that's the negative record. You don't want to back that type of founder, right? There was way too much cheap money, way too much capital chasing opportunities, not just in the VC world. Again, crypto is a great example. Stock exchange, no different, right? I mean, the fact that it's all-time highs, and if you look at the correlation between S&P 500 with the balance sheet of the Fed, it's almost one-to-one correlation, which means it's the liquidity that effectively drives the inflation in financial assets. Now, liquidity is drying up. Yeah, fine. It's maybe going up at this point in time because of the Silicon Valley bank crisis or banking crisis in general. But I would say investors are definitely more selective. We observe that from the conversations we have with our investors. We got our round closed a couple of weeks before SVB blew up. So, very, very lucky timing. But it will be interesting. I mean, I think 12 to 18 months, there will be a cleanse, which is always welcome. I think
the reset.
Absolutely. Focus will be on generating revenue, profitability, obviously, bringing down your cash burn.
And that's what it's about, though.
And that's what the business actually should be about.
I spoke with a guy you should connect with. It's called Roy Samuel. He's from UK. And he's built a startup. He's built a second startup, which allows people like you, maybe a bit earlier stage than you, to look into your business to see your cash flow. So you can go to investors and say, this is all the dashboards and shit of this. And we were joking about this being like, at the end of the day, like you should be trying to generate revenue, GP, have profit and understand those metrics. But why I became a little bit disenfranchised with it, because free users, of course you can monetize them in the future, but they actually mean nothing. And that guy Roy said to me a very interesting point. He said, people are interested now in paid users. So SaaS businesses, for instance, if you have 100,000 users, but 10,000 paid users, VCs are looking at that 10,000 and saying, okay, how much can convert, of course, whatever. But that makes more sense to me than, you think you can grow this by 1,000x? Here's 400 million, that kind of way. It's just, I don't know. I just never really got it. Maybe that's wrong, and maybe I'll change my perspective on it, of course, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I kind of saw it small play out the last year or two. Yeah,
I think there could be some variations, meaning if a startup is a data company and you need to get access to a lot of data, maybe then free product makes sense because you need to collect that data, and maybe that helps to train your algorithm. So that could be an angle, but nevertheless, if you are not making money, it means you are burning money, right? And the money is coming from VCs. So how much expansion do you expect to have without having any profitability? I mean, Uber is a great example, right? Uber would not survive in 2023. If they were a startup company now, they would die. They built their business purely on cheap capital. That's it.
Yeah. And again, just different timing.
Different timing.
Same in Airbnb, maybe.
Absolutely.
Airbnb getting rinsed, and of course they have been as well in recent times. I want to ask you about working hard and working smart. So this is why I want you to write more. One of your recent posts I saw a couple of months ago, you were saying how you wouldn't trade necessarily just working smart. You'd want to work pretty hard, and you've always had that in you.
Okay.
And I think that's quite interesting because maybe it comes from Estonia, maybe it comes from Eastern Europe. I'm of that kind of belief too, but what do you think is more important, working hard or working smart?
So the post was a bit controversial.
I liked it.
It was designed to be a bit controversial, but I guess my point was that with recent years, the social media has painted us a picture, and maybe our generation is more influenced by that, right? Us being I'm a millennial. I think maybe you are not a millennial anymore, but
27, my baby.
Okay, your baby. but social media has painted us an image whereby you can make a lot of money by doing something in a hammock on a tropical island, maybe trading something, buying some sort of trading course, doing that, maybe doing some sort of drop shipping somewhere. And I understand these are all viable ways how to make money. But the majority of people who do that don't make money, actually. So you only see those few really successful use cases. But the rest of them, I mean, are barely making it, or they just lose their capital that they invest. So I think there is a bit of beauty in the hustle, right? And you can hustle also by doing those alternative, ways of earning revenue, whether it's dropshipping or not. But actually learning skills, cutting your teeth in certain industry like you do. I mean, with your podcasts. I mean, you started from basically doing podcasts to now teaching people how to do podcasts, right? So going through all that hustle, I think you can't discount the value of hard work. And I have a feeling that these days, a lot of the influencers, they're trying to discount the value of hard work.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to get to the stage whereby you can just automate it and you can skip the hard work part.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. So that bracket in the world is these people are trying to get rich by teaching you how to get rich or how to do this, but they never just did that certain thing.
Yeah.
And often people can only do the drop shipping and not have to rely on teaching you how to do it because you're making so much money from it. Now, there is people, and I agree with this part as well, is the fact that if you've built a successful drop shipping business, after some time, if it's very successful, you may have scope to help other people do it. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but you have to get that experience first. And it's just key.
Yeah.
And one of my good mates, Tim Stoddard, he said that when he was coming to social media to discuss his business, he spent 12 years building an agency. He never wanted to be the advice giver. He always wanted to just share experiences. So he would say, this is how I got my clients. This is my experience. And it's unfeudable. You can't say that that's wrong because that's his experience. So that's where you get into this kind of whole paradigm whereby your advice is bullshit, his advice is trustworthy. And it's just a different paradigm. But I do think that, this is from Lex Fridman too, you can only work smart by working really hard at first.
I 100% agreed, yeah. 100%.
So let's look at your example with Bank of America, for instance. When you were working 12, 14 hours a day, you got really good at like banging out those processes and getting really good at it. And after a while you would say, okay, now I can do this Excel automation flow or something.
Yeah.
You have to get that part in. And I'm seeing that myself, but I think people aren't willing to give the time to do it. And it takes months and years at that process,
I like the saying that you have to know the rules before you can break them.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's you can't optimize something until you know the process front to back.
Yeah.
So me charging $500 for my hour of consultancy or so, but it's only 1 hour, but it took me 10 years.
100%.
It took me 10 years to give you that knowledge within that 1 hour. And I'm charging you not for the 1 hour, I'm charging you for those 10 years.
Exactly. And what you're going to learn. And I love that because people just think it's just words, but it's actually what's in here.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're paying for. They're unlocking that talent. And that's why where you're situated now, you've done your 12, 13 years of experience. You're at a beautiful kind of part because you're building continuously, and that becomes very knowledgeable to other people. I think there's nothing wrong with that, but we're in this world whereby like we have 21-year-old life coaches, who have no life experiences, and that runs into the problems.
Yeah, and I keep saying as well that there isn't much traffic on that extra mile, meaning that if you work hard at something and you build that tenacity and that focus on something, most people give up, much earlier. Very, very few are left. And I think that's what really sets us apart when things get tough, right? Who has that mental resiliency to go through hardship? Because most of us are just like, oh yeah, there are easier ways to earn money, easier ways to do this. I'm just going to go along that way. And that may work. Again, that may work. But how do you make yourself resilient? Recession proof? How do you sustain yourself through different economic cycles, us as professionals or just individuals? And that comes through experience in different areas, pushing yourself through that hardship, and also building that self-confidence that, I did that once. I'm going to do that again. No problem. Hold my beer.
And you know what? That's where life experiences are really helpful there, because let's say if it's something to do with like health or fitness, like you worked really hard and you're able to build, like, get a couple of goals, you can use that transferable. And I always use that example. Like if I'm trying to build something new or start something, I can say, look, I did this. This new thing is really new, a new novel, but I can still go on try to at least smash it, try your best at it, and you're building that kind of self-belief.
Yeah. And going through hardships, I think, is the best way to build your self-confidence. Going through difficult experiences, being uncomfortable constantly, you know it. You exercise, you train. Exercise is nothing than teaching your body and your brain to cope with small, predictable or short-term predictable stresses. So when shit hits the fan and you have some other type of stress, I don't know, your boss is yelling at you or something, it's almost the body is like, I know how to do this. I'm just going to go into my resiliency mode and I'm going to push through, because the body doesn't know if it's your boss yelling at you or, I don't know, a tiger chasing you, right? The stress is stress for your body. So teaching yourself how to go through small stresses, that's where the self-confidence comes from.
Yeah, and I feel like that the way you've ended up in like your career has just come from that continuously. You know what I mean? What were some of those kind of challenges you faced, do you think, that were...
Well, life has humbled me on many, many occasions, to be honest. So I've been fired 3 times in my life. The firings, luckily, have never been because of my poor work ethics or results, but they've been a function and a product of some sort of economic or structural change. So, and that just has taught me that doesn't matter. I can be the best at something, but if things are not going in my favor or if something changes at a larger scale, I need to be ready for that. So definitely COVID was a big shock for me. I mean, obviously for everyone, but being an expat in Singapore, working for a hedge fund that did a lot of private credit in trade finance. There wasn't much trade finance in 2020. I can tell you that, because that's all about commodities, different type of goods that economies would use. Nothing of that was moving around. So our company went belly up. I was completely caught off guard. I need to leave the country within a certain number of days.
What?
There were no flights out of Singapore. I was in that type of shit show. So that was probably one of the most humbling moments in my life.
What did you do there?
So what I did, I went to LinkedIn. That was a time when LinkedIn already had become, a tool. I posted a couple of videos of myself at my house, just saying, this is me. I've done this in my life. I'm open to new opportunities, preferably in Europe, but open anywhere I can work. And behold, I was offered a position in Cyprus.
That's awesome. That's why LinkedIn is so powerful.
It is, yeah.
That's why it's just so, so powerful. That is crazy, though, coming out of Singapore like that.
Yeah, and I like when things happen within, on my terms, I shall say.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't like the fact I had to leave Singapore on my terms.
Yeah.
It was a very bittersweet goodbye for me, but I was quite happy to come back just 18 months later. Actually, no, 2 years later, roughly.
Yeah. But of course, like, nothing is forever, like we said. You know what I mean? Like, if that finishes up and you're not that happy with it, you can still move on.
Yeah.
And go to Cyprus. You enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
So you learn from that experience, you can bring it elsewhere.
Absolutely. And for me, I was a person who was very rigid in my ways until 2020, meaning that I would always wake up 5:45. I was in gym by 6-ish, 6:30 maybe. My day was very regimented. I do this. I knew exactly what I was going to do in 2 weeks on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. I knew it. And I think going through that 2020 experience, I keep thinking back that I think within 18-month period, I must have slept on at least 50 mattresses, beds, spare beds, inflatable this, inflatable that. You know what I mean? Like living out of my suitcase. And for me, it was such a hard adjustment, Darren. Like I was under immense stress, but again, that was a learning curve for me that you don't have to be so rigid with your life. You can be a bit more fluid, a bit more.
You're not going to die.
Exactly. I'm not going to die. What's the worst that can happen? So it was blessing in disguise, as many things are. And I think when things go bad or shit hits the fan for me, I've come to a point now where I'm like, okay, this is life teaching me something. It's going to make sense maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 5 years. But no point of getting depressed or getting bitter over it, but just rather, enjoy the experience. It's just an experience.
And you've been able to go from zero a lot of times. But that's the biggest thing, is like build from zero. So
build from zero,
whether it's like getting a new place somewhere or moving company. And I think the more times you can learn and go from zero, that means like you could try it again. If you ever wanted to do something new, I have no doubt you could build something from scratch.
Yes, there's always a doubt. I mean, there's always this imposter syndrome that we spoke about earlier. But I think when you have done it once, then the self-confidence comes again. And talking about that moving around, I was just filling in Singapore PR application the other day.
Nice, congratulations.
Well, I mean, I only filled it in, right? Not that I was granted anything, but there's a question. Can you please give all your residential addresses for the last 10 years? I realized I've lived in 9 different places within the last 10 years.
Oh my God.
So that puts things into perspective, right? Like, man, I've moved around a lot. Like, there hasn't been much stability as such.
But that's part of it. And that's why you're so social. You're able to get out there and like meet new people.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're not in a cloud.
Yeah.
You're not in like a weighted blanket. Just chilling out. You know what I mean? You've left. You've been able to build what you want to do.
Yeah, and not all of it has been voluntary, but I would say it's again helped with that evolving part of personality and professional career.
Definitely. I wanted to ask you about mentorship and particularly Simon Ree.
Yeah.
So you got into trading in 2019?
2019.
Why did you do that?
2019 was just a time when I was like, I want to try a new skill. I want to do something new. And then Simon Ree popped up on my LinkedIn feed as he would, right? I signed up for his options trading probably in 2020. I've been following him ever since. Absolutely brilliant. I think in terms of mentorship, having that access to him as a professional, as a person, not just a professional, but as an individual, is just invaluable. But mentorship in general has been a big part of my life, I would say. I've always had either a formal or informal mentor. Okay. Bank of America was great back in 2012. They had a formal mentorship program. So they assigned a senior director to mentor one of the junior employees. So I always have had somebody to point me in the right direction, tell me that, oh yeah, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. I encourage everyone, not just junior, but also people who are more advanced in their career, find somebody who can mentor you, who can add some sort of value.
For sure. Did you find that was kind of quite formal, or was it more like, was it natural?
There have been formal mentorships for me. There have been some that have developed just on their own. And a good example is my current business partner, who was senior to me at Bank of America. We just started hanging out, is the best word, at company events. You see a familiar face, you have a chit chat. He started sharing a couple of, tips, how to manage the politics, how to manage the hierarchy. Again, that was the time I just joined investment banking. For me, it was a completely new world, and I really struggled, to be honest. And that morphed into a friendship, and that has now morphed into a business relationship. So I'm very lucky and very blessed to work with one of my best friends who used to be my mentor as well. And he's the biggest female advocate. So I give him like all the respect.
And it's interesting because sometimes I think that if it's like forced, it's not natural, and then it's like, okay, it's transactional. Like, oh, I'm coming to you, I expect help and whatever. Yeah. But the best kind that I try to help with is just like more natural, small nuance, whether it's a podcast like this, you come to and you learn, you get kind of mentorship for that person, or it's someone that you just kind of DM every once in a while. Yeah. But you can do it much more naturally. Because sometimes I think like there's too much of an emphasis for people. Younger people are like, I need a mentor, I need like a business mentor, I need this. Of course you need it, but it's just, it's contextual.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of it comes down to chemistry. And maybe it's an overused word, but sometimes you just have chemistry with somebody. It's very easy to build mentorship on that. And with some people, you just don't. And that's okay, right? I mean, then you just go and look for somebody else that you have that chemistry, because I think with mentorship, trust is absolutely paramount. It's important. You need to trust the person. You need to have that ability to be vulnerable, to share, insecurities and have to be able to take feedback from that person. So, but this day and age, again, LinkedIn is a brilliant tool to find a mentor. I've had mentors that I've found through LinkedIn. I've never met in person. I have no idea, what they're like if we would have that chemistry face to face. but just because I have found their very candid advice to be good. Like even, when I post something or when I do the video, oh yeah, you could have maybe done this better. Or when they look at my videos from conferences, a great advice, I think you use your hands too much, like be mindful of that. So I keep saying, I used to be Italian, I think. I have to tie down my hands. So that type of advice is really good, right? I mean, somebody who doesn't come from a place of, oh, you didn't do particularly well, but you did great, but I noticed that maybe you can improve on that.
Yeah. And I think it's when it's more natural, like for instance, like my mate Ned here that I mentioned you before, Ned Phillips, like he's like a mentor, but he's not.
I understand.
We went for dinner with like his wife, my girlfriend, last weekend, and I was even saying to Elise, I was like, he's someone that I really want to emulate my career. Like he's traveled all around the world.
Yeah.
Spent 30 years in Asia.
Yeah.
Has this huge company that's like valued at like I don't know how many million.
Yeah.
And good relationship. He's an ultra marathon runner. And I was thinking, I was like, that's like a way to guide your life, but obviously not mirror, but it's a good way to kind of give you that direction. I don't necessarily ask him to be my fucking mentor, but we go back and forth on WhatsApp on different ideas.
Yes.
And what's funny is it's actually bi-directional. I would help him out with stuff and vice versa. And that's obviously the same for you as well.
Absolutely. And I think the mentorship relationship can't be such that I only want something. I only want something. I think it has to be, I'm going to give something in return. And sometimes for mentors, the joy comes, rather let me rephrase, maybe for mentors, sometimes what they get back is the emotion. You taking their advice, you sharing how a situation was resolved based on their advice, if you know what I mean. Like it's more just the experience that somebody can benefit from what I have shared with them. That's also giving back in a way. Like when I mentor younger professionals, I have a let's call it an informal mentee in Estonia. Actually, he is the son of one of my best friends, but he's in his early 20s, just graduating from university, just about to tip his toes into professional life. So he comes for advice quite a bit, and he's really intelligent young man. EQ, maybe not so much. IQ, definitely. EQ is I mean, he's still young.
Life experiences.
Life experiences. And sometimes the only thing I get back from him, and it's really rewarding for me, is hearing how he did really well based on my advice in certain situation, in a job interview. So he scored an amazing internship, right? Because he went prepared and spoke about the Federal Reserve Bank's policy for the next 18 months. Obviously, we had, exchanged notes and discussed things. Yeah. How is the yield curve going to react to the next Fed meeting? And apparently the committee was like, we've never had anyone, who's like second year uni and coming with such knowledge. So him sharing that with pride is like,
100%.
I did that.
And that's why, to bring it back to your first interview with Bank of America, they gave you that chance because they saw the hunger and drive, and they liked that. You know what I mean? That guy or a woman who initially gave you the interview, they felt that sense of like, I don't know, pride or whatever it was, or fulfillment. And that's how it works in tandem. So I noticed straight when I moved here, like people would often reach out and they're like, oh, like what's like an Irish guy doing out in the middle of Singapore? We'd go for lunch, they'd get me like a coffee, whatever. And I noticed that they wanted to uplift people.
Yes.
And as we discussed previously as well, like the people that are above you do want to do have a hand down to drag you up.
Absolutely.
They expect you to work there. It's not going to be. And they do handpick the people who do work. I'm not saying that everyone helps everyone, because that's not the reality of the world. But if you are willing to put in that effort, people will definitely help you.
Absolutely. And good leaders are those that grow more good leaders.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, your development is different. Like some people might be like taking it easy in their early 20s and get more serious. So it's not like you need to be fucking on the grind 24/7. But what I do find is that you need to just at least have the attitude that you're going to get better. Because people always say that, like, oh, like how do I build a network and stuff? First step I would say is build a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. You should.
Is build a podcast. But if you can't build a podcast, I would always advise just to have that eagerness like you've done.
Yeah, and I think this day and age, you have so many different options how and where to find a mentor, right? I mean, I spoke or shared briefly previously that there's a professional network in Singapore called Uncommon. I haven't actually heard about them before, but very interesting. Again, I was thinking in my head earlier this year that I feel like I'm in such stage in my life and career that I actually want to have a mentor again. But I want a mentor that's outside of my work environment and my close proximity. I want somebody who doesn't know me, who doesn't know my context, but somebody who can have, maybe sessions with me, who can look my media presence, all the type of stuff, and give me feedback. How could I grow as a professional? And out of the blue, this network reaches out and says, "Oh, we like your profile. Would you like to become a member?" Because it's almost like a selective basis. And I was like, okay, so it's universe again, maybe 100%. Responding to my calls in a way. And I'm quite excited to be part of that program.
Yeah, I think you can have a huge account. I swear to God, when I was looking through your content, you're right place, right time, you have a great story, great experience, you're not full of bullshit. Like, I do think you just need to, I suppose, have more confidence to write,
Yeah, that's something I'm still practicing, the confidence and being, open and being vulnerable and talking about stuff that, I can write pages and pages about, again, inflation and macro, but nobody gives a fuck, to be honest.
It's just the longevity of it. Like, if you want to be like an inflation expert, sure.
No, I don't. That's the thing. I don't. Yeah.
But I think like even for you, it's difficult, right? Because, not like saying for you, but in general, when people start writing, they usually try to type like platitude content, so they'll write like generic shit.
Yeah.
But you're better off just sharing your experience.
Yeah.
Because as we said it earlier, it's unique to yourself.
Yes.
So if you're discussing, let's say, like moving from corporate companies into tech companies or startups, like that's very valuable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's pretty much what my podcast is based off, bear in mind. And you can only share your experiences. You don't need to go too vulnerable if you didn't want to, but you build that base, and then you might build a newsletter, and you build a newsletter, you might build like a YouTube channel, and from a YouTube channel then you have a few different things going, and then you know that your brand is being elevated. Yeah,
I think it's just another thing that just requires time, focus, effort, and skills, and everything is basically learnable, right? I'll definitely take a lot of the pointers you've shared, and I know that you have a lot of really good content around there, how to recycle even one interview, one podcast, how many different ways you can slice and dice it and just reuse it. I think this is something I still don't know how to do.
Of course.
Just because I'm like, I have to have fresh content for every single post that I have,
it's
right?
An industry. It's an entire industry, you know what I mean? It's like if I was to get into some different aspect of banking, like I would barely be able to scrape the surface, so I'd love to help you like with this stuff. Like I can genuinely, as we said, 2 years in my brain, sharing with you could take me 20 minutes. You can just go through these different things, but very simple. I think like we'll even show an example from this podcast, different types of content that you actually believe in. It will resonate with a lot of people. As I imagine a lot of women coming to university would see you as like a particular leader in the space.
That's another interesting thing you just mentioned, because we spoke about earlier about being a role model and, having that sort of representativeness of women in certain places. So I've struggled a lot with the fact that I don't want to be the stereotype. I don't want to be the woman, the female CIO. Like, why can't I just be a CIO?
100%.
And then somebody told me, a mentor told me that, Kaia, you need to understand that you may not think about it, that you want to be labeled in a specific way, but there are young professionals, females, and also men looking up to you in a certain way. And like it or not, they want to stereotype you in a specific way. And the best way to get your message across and add that value is maybe to use that stereotype, go and put yourself out there as the female CIO. So the young investment analysts can look at you and say, I want to be that female CIO. So in a way, it's going slightly against what feels natural and comfortable for me, because I don't feel like I need that label necessarily, but just in order to power or get that message and empower those younger professionals to work towards some sort of, if it's a label or if it's some kind of career status or position.
You could do without it though.
Yeah. But you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. I just think it's an interesting topic though, because of course you're female.
Yeah. It's obvious, right?
It's obvious. And you're obviously accomplished.
Yeah.
So that stands on its own.
Yeah.
And we discussed this as well earlier, like when people look at my podcast, like, I'm young, but I've been doing it a long time
Yeah.
and I'm putting time into it. So when I speak to people, I don't say I'm Darren Lee that has done 142 podcasts. I just say like I'm Darren Lee. People are like, oh, we might check it out and see it. So there is that perspective. So I'm just saying, if you feel like icky talking about it, then leave it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not the whole purpose, you know? Because I do think we need better role models in the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, for younger women as well, they want to look up to women, I imagine. And it's not intentional, but it's just like biological to some degree, just like that perspective, you know? And I don't know, maybe it's more relatable. And I was speaking with someone last week on a podcast. We were talking to people like Elon Musk and stuff. And like, I don't grow up thinking I want to be like Elon Musk, because he's just different than me, whatever. But I do want to be like someone who's like 50 years old, who's fit, healthy, wealthy, has good relationships, and is well traveled. It doesn't matter if it's male or female.
You think Elon Musk has good relationships?
No, that's what I mean. That's the thing, you know? So there's some people that you don't necessarily gravitate towards. And if I was to break it down, I would just think it's because he's quite introverted to some degree.
Yes. A bit facetious question, to be honest. So
it's interesting though, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I get what you mean. It's not about a person as such. It's more like the characteristics or the qualities. And I think this is important for me increasingly as well. How do I come across? How do I show up in my workplace? Being a, part of the executive team, how do I show up? How do I empower our junior employees? How do I empower people, I don't know, listening to this podcast or listening to any other podcast? Or I just did an interesting International Women's Day event with Capgemini. They had their global IT recruitment team on the call. I thought there would be 20 people on the call, right? It was just like whatever Q&A type of conversation. There was 100 people on the call. I was again, why would they want to hear what I have to say? Yeah. And the feedback was just, so empowering, energizing, motivating. Like, really? Like, do you read the feedback? Is it about my call or? Yeah. So yeah, just having that type of feedback was quite fascinating as well.
I often found as well that you don't need to say the thing for it to take effect.
Yes.
So like when you see a CEO walk into the room, he doesn't say everything he's done. He's just like there. It's his presence. It's your energy that's quite unique because like you're not the standard typical corporate worker, so you have that flavor, which is like awesome, and lead into it. Yeah. So I'd love to help you in any way.
Cool. Thank you for that.
At any point. Yeah. One area I want to get into as well is about your trading. How has that learning curve been for you?
So I started trading when the markets were pointing up, which was again blessing in a way, but also probably didn't teach me risk management skills particularly well. So I made decent amount of money. Again, we're not talking about tens of thousands here. I started my trading account with $3,000, but up 20% one month, 15% next month.
Great.
Then I crashed. I lost most of it, because I didn't have proper risk management skills. So that's why Simon, I think, sometimes says it's better to start when things are a bit trickier, like maybe markets this day and age. You don't have trending up and trending down. You have to actually read the market a bit more. Now I've gotten much better, consistently in the black, so making money, not a lot of it, but using a lot of risk management, using a lot of the tools. I still rely on Simon, meaning that I'm part of the program. I watch his daily videos. And again, he's an amazing mentor because he gives access to his thinking every day, anything from 15 to 30 minutes, depending how long his videos are. So I think having that type of mentor is the easiest way to learn, relying on somebody that has decades worth of experience compressed into that 15-minute video. Absolutely invaluable.
Oh my God. And like I was in Simon's course as well.
Yeah. Which one did you do?
Options Academy.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. But for me, again, exactly to your point, it was in like turbulent times, like markets like sideways. But for me, I want to be fully into one thing and one thing only. Now, I haven't in the past. So I was trading for months and months and months. And as you said, like some months in the black, some months in the red. But what I'd love to do is just focus in on what I'm focusing on now and go fully hog in that, and then come back to this, because I feel like that sometimes when you have so much stuff going on in your life, you never go deep on it.
Yeah.
So even though like trading for me was like working and I was using like some of Simon's techniques and it was all going well, what I found was that I wasn't learning. And that's the problem. So when you're just like trading and you're just putting on like 5 trades a week or 3 trades a week, whatever, but you're not learning because you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I was advised this from a guy on my podcast who was saying, if you get rid of everything you're doing in your life, not like everything, but all the side projects, and just focus on one, that's all the focus is. So that's been trading for you. So you've been in the shower, washing your hair, thinking about it. You're going to bed, you're thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it. And that's what clicked for you.
Yeah.
So that's a learning that I've had from this experience, is that even though I've been doing it for so many months, I definitely want to do it in a point in my life whereby I'm just doing that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I split focus, and as a result, I'm a big guy on focus, if you haven't mattered, you know, just like extreme deep work. And maybe I'm just not intelligent enough to manage multiple things.
I think, Darren, your approach is correct. If you want to really master a skill, you have to go deep. And admittedly, I'm a person who gets torn in different directions. So I'm the person who gets interested in many things. So
same, I'm the exact same.
And it's a burden, to be honest. I love reading, I love exercising, I love my work. I like to work hard, you know, on the projects I do. I like to keep up to date with the podcast, so constantly something in my ear. I like to trade. So it's almost like there's too many things going on. Now I'm trying to build my, you know, social media presence or brand. So there's a lot of things going on. So I think actually your approach is better. I think going deep in something, because I am definitely torn between 3, 4, 5 different things constantly. But what I try to do is that I try to cut my day into chunks. And I try to live by that schedule. Like if I have blocked out from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., I do trading.
Yeah.
I do trading.
Yeah.
My phone is off. I actually do trading. Like I don't care if, okay, fine. If there's a fire, I'm going to attend to that fire. But if there's something that maybe I should be doing this instead, I'm like, nope, my calendar is booked for trading. And 100%. I do that at work as well. Like office time, certain hour to certain hour, I go deep, headset is on. I don't want anyone to speak to me. I want to solve that problem, or I want to accomplish my task within that time period.
And of course, like that's the way to do it. If you're gonna do it, that's what like Elon Musk does. He has like six different companies. He splits them up properly.
Yeah,
and it's 100% the best way to do it if you're compartmentalizing it. And what you should be kind of doing, what I hope to be doing, is that as you build stuff, you're able to add more in. But I always think about that, because sometimes if you get really good at, let's say you're trading and you do it in 30 minutes versus an hour. Then you think, oh, for the other 30 minutes, I'll start reading. And you're adding more into the bucket. And the bucket is just getting raised and raised and raised. So I'm trying to actually leave time for other things. Like you're asking me earlier, what do I do? And I was like, you know, if I do have more time, I'll go to the beach. I'll go to the park. I'll take things easy. And I'll try to, it's almost like unwind my mind to get back into the same thing though.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a different way to look at it. I don't know if it's necessarily the right way. It's just a strategy I'm trying to follow at the moment, because like I've done everything. Like I did e-com, I did crypto, did trading, did
coding,
not coding. I think I did software engineering as a degree.
Yeah, okay.
Hated it.
Yeah, okay.
Hated it. Well, it was called business information systems.
Is it too boring for you?
No, I'm dyslexic. So I can't read shit when it comes to code and stuff. So I write every day and I use like all the tools. And I'm not like too dyslexic, but when it comes to code, I was so shit at it. But I got a 1-1 in my last year.
Okay, awesome.
But until then, it's just something that I just couldn't grasp. The reason why is because I was using no code for so long. Yeah. You know, I built like an e-com company off Shopify.
Okay, cool.
And I was like, I don't need to do anything. And I was like 20 at the time, you know? So I didn't need it.
Yeah. But your point about having those downtimes as well, I think it's absolutely critical. I think creativity is closely linked to boredom. Sure. So, and I try to do that now on weekends. So weekends I don't do much. I mean, I go to the gym, I maybe read a bit. Then I just lay on my couch. When you look outside, and I have this like lovely terrace with the plants. I just look there and I try to look at all the different colors of green, and I try to see, how many birds do I see? That type of stuff. Yeah. And interestingly, a couple of ideas have come to my head exactly in these moments, because your brain is not focusing on something. So you actually get to be more fluid again. And yeah, that was one of those moments when I was like, maybe I should do my brand on social media. I'm going to focus on that. So that type of idea generation, I think, comes exactly from the moments of boredom. So 100%. I think this day and age, again, I think our days are very structured. We're constantly torn between different things. Social media, friends, having personal life, going home, spending time with our families, have to have time for yourself only, being in isolation. I'm a big fan of actually being in isolation, being alone, being in silence, not even having music, and just letting all the sensory deprivation, I think is the sort of right term for that.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
One of the last things I want to ask you about is alcohol. So I saw you spent January without drinking any alcohol?
Yes. It's actually extended now until whatever the date is today, 31st of March. I've had alcohol on 5 days since January the 13th.
So the amount of people that are doing little or no alcohol is incredible recently.
Yeah.
So I've gone 8 months, 9 months.
Wow, impressive.
Yeah. So
and how do you feel?
I'm no angel, right?
Okay, no, I get it. It doesn't have to be extremes, right? It doesn't have to be black and white.
So my experience was young Irish guy.
Mm-hmm.
All we do is drink. All we do is go out. My last outing was of course a festival, a party, whatever. What I was looking at was that if I looked at people like yourself or other people that I wanted to be with or aspire to podcast with or be from a company perspective, I was looking at what they had that I didn't have, and if I eliminated the stupid shit, which was going out drinking, I can potentially get to that point at some point. So I initially just felt a lot better. I think I had a kind of a sudden urge of it.
Yeah.
But then of course over time then that diminishes out. But my sleep is better. My diet is better. I'm less stressed. I'm less anxious.
Same.
But the biggest thing for me is the fact that I don't think about doing it. So when it's Wednesday or Thursday, I'm focused in on work. I'm thinking about work. When it's Friday, people are saying, oh, it's Friday. It's a Friday feeling. I'm working. My mind is razor sharp. When I wake up on a Saturday morning, I'm working and I can just zero in on it. It's not about working more. It's just about the fact that I feel better. I train Sunday mornings really early and I keep that laser focus. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with going out for a drink or whatever, but people like Andrew Huberman have literally shown that alcohol is only net negative. It's not positive in any regard. And of course, there's some people that I have a glass of wine at night and they say there's this benefits, but he actually proved that it wasn't beneficial. So I did it for a few months and now it's been 9 months. It'll be a year in June, which is 3 months from now. The question I ask myself is, why would I drink versus when will I drink again? Because it can only work against me. I'll be out to the club till 6 o'clock in the morning. I'll be chatting shit to people.
Yeah.
I'll be talking about plans that I'm never going to do.
Yeah.
Whereas now I have a good relationship with my girlfriend. Take it easy. Don't need to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Very similar experience. Again, being Eastern European, I think alcohol is part of our culture as well. We joke that we are born basically a bit tipsy. Point being, alcoholism is a big problem in my country.
Especially Ireland.
Yeah, Ireland as well, yeah, obviously. So I can't say that I've been drinking heavily in my life. But of course, being part of financial services, it means that there's quite a bit of networking. As I'm getting older, I realize I'm actually introvert more than an extrovert. I can be an extrovert if I want to, but more natural in an environment where you have a lot of people, I'm introverted. So I almost needed alcohol to be able to go and network and, be the social butterfly, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times per week. Especially if you had investor meetings and stuff. So it got to a point for me last year whereby I had a lot of travel, a lot of social engagements, quite stressful work. So having that glass of wine or two was almost like necessity. Oh, what do you mean I don't have a glass of wine? Of course I'm going to go have a glass of wine. And the same thing, I felt anxiety. I felt that my quality of sleep went down. I had my 8 hours. I woke up exhausted, Darren, absolutely exhausted. I hadn't slept at all. And I look at my watch and I can see that I never went to the deep sleep phase. So the Apple Watch basically shows your sleep patterns. And I don't like to go into extremes. So when I started my so-called sober period, it was more like, I'm going to be sober for a week. Mini goal, 1 week, that's it. I'm not going to say that I'll be sober for a whole year. Okay, one week went by. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do one more week. At the end of the second week, I got a bit sick. So I didn't have any alcohol for any appetite for alcohol. And then I realized, it's 3.5 weeks already. I'm just going to push it until 1 month. And then on the 1 month anniversary, I had a couple of glasses of wine. I hated it. It didn't taste good. I had horrible headache the next day, not hangover, but just headache. I think there was an adverse reaction to the alcohol. And I made a decision that I'm going to stop drinking to the extent and the regularity I had before. And exactly your experience, man. I sleep better. I don't have anxiety. My brain demands for information. It demands for being, used. Yeah. I like to learn. I like to speak to people when I'm sober. I like to talk about, deeper topics than just small talk, chit chat, right?
Bullshit.
So yeah, exactly. I feel the conversations have much more meaning in them. There's much more engagement.
I saw my speech get better.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which was
that could happen. Yeah.
So I would go out on like a Friday, Saturday, and like I'm a guy now, right? Yeah. And I was definitely like a proper party boy. And if I was recording on Monday or Tuesday, I would literally wouldn't be able to put two things together in my head. Or even like Wednesday or Thursday, I would like slur my words and I would go back over audio and I always listen to myself. I have to. And I'm like, how am I speaking? I'm using like filler words and all things like this. And I noticed that like literally the neural networks in my head were not connecting.
Yeah.
Literally were not connecting. I thought it was down to exhaustion, alcohol. And I was like, what is going on here? And I wasn't going crazy, but I was when I was younger for sure.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was just a crazy shift. And you said a great point about being out. So yeah, like what I've learned is that not drinking makes other people feel uncomfortable, not you, because they feel insecure because they're like, fuck, I shouldn't be doing this. So then if you're just like, oh, I'm not drinking, whatever, they're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't because maybe I want to be like you someday. And maybe this is a trait that people don't do. And that's where they feel uncomfortable. And if they feel uncomfortable, then so be it. Like that's not on you. You know what I mean? That's not your problem.
It's not my problem. Yeah. And I'm not going to say that I'm never going to drink again, right? Of course. Again, going on holiday, I enjoy the drink. I enjoy my glass of wine. I like gin and tonic. That's one of my sort of, not to say weaknesses, but I like the drink, right? I like the taste.
Eastern European,
exactly. I should say I like vodka. Sorry for that, buddy. But point being is that if I measure the reward, if I look how I feel when I have the drink versus how I feel when I don't have the drink, there's no question about how I want to live my life, how I want to show up. And again, my business partner said something simple and quite profound. If we want to build $1 billion business, we're not going to do it whilst hungover. And I think that was something that for me, it was, he's right. Like we have the opportunity. We have the investor feedback. We're doing great. We have an awesome team. We have the capital now. There's a market opportunity to expand to Europe, to expand to the US. We can't do it whilst tipsy or hungover. We have to be sharp. We have to be focused. We have to be able to articulate. We have to be able to tolerate travel, time zones, jet lag, all that type of stuff. Alcohol is not going to make that any easier. So there's a time and a place for everything, right? So I think for the time being sober, being focused is the right way to go.
That's an awesome way to even end. And I think that's so true. I really, really feel that deep down. If I was to ever separate whenever I did well versus I ever did poorly in life, exams, studying, early years in career, building a podcast, anything, it's a period whereby either have no drink or reduced drink. And it's also other things too. It's social media, like don't have notifications on my phone anymore. Like, cause there's more nuances, but I kind of put them all in the one bracket.
Yeah.
They're just in this kind of like, I wouldn't say addiction bracket, but I'd say like obsession bracket, whereby social media, doing stupid stuff, getting into like stupid conversations. It may not happen to you, but it happens to our younger generation. Like that, I put that in the same bracket. It's just an abusive activity.
It makes sense. In a way, I think it's maybe like, unproductive dopamine trigger.
100%.
That's how I would call it. And 100%. Social media is a great way to put it. And it applies to many things. It applies to online shopping, for instance, as well. Like just cut out unnecessary dopamine triggers. The less highs you have, and I know Huberman's podcast, by the way, on dopamine, how to maintain that baseline. Because if baseline is stable, you enjoy the sort of peaks or whatever, the ticks, but you don't have those massive lows either, like the next day hangover. Oh, nothing makes sense. Life is shit. I don't want to do this. I don't want to exercise. Yeah, just keeping that baseline stable. And I think life is easier to tolerate. Again, the small stresses of life are easier to tolerate.
Yeah, and I'll finish up on this note. This guy who I follow was, I think, on my podcast, but things like fell true. His name is J.K. Molina. He's 21 years old from Guatemala, and he sold his first company called Tweet Hunter. It did like an AI tweet inspiration platform, and he said that he never ever goes into the 90 range or 10 range at the bottom of highs and lows. He's always at 65. He'll go to 70, he'll go to 60, but he just stays within there. Now, of course, it might piss him off, but generally speaking, he's always within this range. He's just kind of happy. He's just generally kind of happy, whatever, and it goes up and down. He doesn't party. He literally lives in like the outback in Guatemala. He's around 5 volcanoes. So I thought that was a very interesting way to live your life.
I love it.
And the guy's 21.
Yeah.
Bear in mind.
Yeah. So I've been told previously in my life, and I know I'm extending the topic a little bit, but I've been told that I don't come across as a particularly exciting or excitable person, right? And I thought about that. Am I not excitable? Have I become bitter in life? Have I become sort of the person who doesn't have joy? And I realized, no, I do have joy. I am excitable person, but what I don't have those sharp peaks and the sharp lows. So exactly, I think I live my life also oscillating between 60 and 40. Some days are a bit darker, some days are a bit brighter, but it never goes to extreme. And, for me, that's completely okay.
It's like a trade. For every buy, there's a sell. So if you're at the very top, you're at the very bottom. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I want to say a massive thank you.
Awesome.
How was this experience?
Thank you for having me. I mean, I enjoyed it. I didn't even realize we had cameras.
I want to keep on going, but I'm busy. I gotta go.
We have to work. Exactly.
But thank you so much.
Thank you, Darren.
Let's do more in the future.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.